Back in the 1980s, long before we were all terrified of a biological virus, the KGB engineered a completely different kind of pathogen. This one, it didn't attack your body. No, it was a virus designed specifically to infect the mind, a psychological weapon that turned out to be just as deadly. This is the story of that weapon, Operation Infektion.
So let's jump right into the climax. It's Moscow, 1987. The U.S. Secretary of State, George Shultz, is face-to-face with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, and he's basically holding up a mirror to the Kremlin, confronting them about their own lie. The virus of the mind had traveled from the darkest corners of espionage all the way to the very top. A deliberately crafted lie was now being sold back to its own creators as if it were truth.
See, this wasn't just some random rumor that got out of hand. Oh no, this was a textbook Soviet active measure. That's the official name for their brand of political warfare. And as you can see from this declassified report, these were weaponized stories, forgeries, and covert ops, all designed with one goal in mind: to destabilize an enemy from the inside out.
So the big question is, how did one single calculated lie become a global pandemic of thought? Well, to understand that, we've got to dissect the KGB's playbook. And believe me, it is clinical and it is terrifyingly effective. The whole point of these active measures was ruthlessly simple: create a version of reality that worked for the Soviet Union. It was all about cranking up anti-American hate, causing political chaos inside the US, and just completely shredding Washington's credibility on the world stage, by any means necessary.
And right here, this is the clinical three-step method. First, you plant the seed of the lie in some obscure little newspaper somewhere nobody's really looking. Then you let it incubate, let it bounce around local outlets until it starts to look kind of legitimate. And finally, you propagate it. The official Soviet news agencies pick it up, but now they can point back to that foreign source, completely hiding their own fingerprints. It's a brilliant and totally cynical way to launder a lie.
And we can watch this playbook happen in real time. 1983, you get Patient Zero. A fake letter pops up in an obscure KGB-funded paper in India. 2 years later, it's brought back to life in a major Moscow weekly, which of course cites the Indian source. Then the virus mutates. A bogus scientific report gives it this academic-sounding authority. And by 1987, it's a full-blown pandemic of thought, hitting mainstream newspapers in the West.
The result? It was staggering. The story was reprinted or broadcast in over 80 different countries. Now, think about that. This is a world before social media, before the internet. For a piece of pure disinformation to spread that far, that fast, it was almost unheard of.
And to make sure it was as contagious as possible, the lie was translated into more than 30 languages. It was like they were adapting its genetic code to infect every local population they could. This wasn't just a story. It was a carefully managed global pathogen of an idea.
What made the lies so powerful was its design. It wasn't some vague accusation. It was surgically specific. It named a real, top-secret U.S. military lab, Fort Detrick. That one detail gave it this chilling sense of plausibility, and it tapped directly into very real public anxieties about government secrecy and bioweapons.
So while the KGB was busy spreading this virus of the mind, a small group back in Washington was desperately trying to find an antidote, but they learned a really hard lesson really fast. How do you kill a ghost story? For the U.S. officials fighting this on the front lines, this wasn't just some abstract geopolitical game. It felt personal. It felt incredibly dangerous. Like this official said, the accusation was so effective and so toxic, it was infuriating. This wasn't just a lie. It was a potent weapon being used against them. So the American response was this slow, methodical decontamination effort led by the Active Measures Working Group. They weren't fighting back with their own propaganda. They were fighting with facts. They published detailed reports, they got on the phone and called editors directly, and they confronted Soviet officials with cold, hard evidence. It was this painstaking process of, as they put it, pulling them out one lie at a time.
But here's the real problem. The lie didn't just appear in a vacuum. It was specifically engineered to latch onto real, pre-existing fears and suspicions. In the US, it tapped right into the deep distrust within the African-American community, which was still reeling from the horrors of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. The KGB didn't have to invent the distrust, they just had to weaponize it.
And that's exactly why, even after the Soviet Union collapsed, the lie didn't die with it. The virus of disinformation had already mutated. It had already found new hosts. It had taken on a life of its own.
Finally, in 1992, the admission came. The new head of Russian intelligence came clean and admitted the whole thing was a KGB fabrication from start to finish. But honestly, it was way, way too late. The story was no longer controlled by its creators. It was out in the wild, a self-perpetuating myth.
This really gets to the terrifying heart of a successful lie. Once that mental and cultural conditioning is done, facts often just bounce right off. The lie becomes part of someone's identity, their worldview, and that makes it almost impossible to reverse.
And let's be clear, this had real, lethal consequences. In South Africa, the government actually embraced AIDS denialism, a denialism fueled by this very conspiracy theory. That led to catastrophic delays in getting antiretroviral therapies to the people who needed them. The estimated cost of that delay? 330,000 lives.
Okay, so why does all this history matter so much right now? Because the playbook for Operation Infektion never went away. It became the blueprint, the direct ancestor of the disinformation campaigns that we see all around us today.
The parallel is just striking. On the left, you've got the original lie from the 80s. Target a military lab, exploit fear of government secrecy. And on the right, the echo we hear constantly today. Modern campaigns using the exact same tactic of lab origin claims to weaponize public distrust. The tech has evolved, but the playbook? It's identical.
So what this really means is that Operation Infektion never actually ended. It just became this permanent, festering wound in our information ecosystem. It's one of the most stubborn and damaging conspiracy theories ever created.
That original mind virus, it went viral with just newspapers and radio broadcasts. Now imagine that same playbook supercharged by algorithms and AI and deepfakes. The original virus has spawned countless variants, which leaves all of us with a really critical question. In this new pandemic of disinformation, what is the vaccine?